So trust in media is so essential, so integral. Media are orienting devices. We use them to understand our place in the world and understand ourselves in relation to other things. And so we have about 3.2 billion photos that are taken a day, millions of videos, all sorts of content that comes out at us, and we make decisions based on that content. We help us understand how to vote, who to vote for, where to go on holiday, all that kind of stuff. And so if we can't trust the media that we have, that's quite a big issue for democracy. You have lots of misinformation and disinformation out there on social media especially, and a lot of it might be put out by trolls or by bots and such, but you also have more mainstream journalists, news organizations retweeting, resharing that content potentially, and we don't necessarily know the provenance or where that media come from a lot of times. And so if we can try to more better assess and vet and see what type of visual media we have, and if it comes from a solid, reliable, trustworthy source, and it's been edited correctly and authentically and ethically, that'll give us more trust and confidence going forward.
Well, I think we're already starting to see that. We've started to see the quick spread or the mimetic spread of fake information and propaganda campaigns and how they affect obviously elections and things like this. But I think even offline, in terms of beyond journalism, we're seeing the role of fake news and the misspreading of information, how it can quite often lead to really, at times, deadly consequences, as we've seen in the case of India. So I think one of the biggest things that we really need to worry about is how do we authenticate these contents? How do we actually better design technical infrastructure, but also processes in which the content passes through to identify the potential of fake news to spread, because I do think the ramifications for that is greater public mistrust, and I think we also can potentially see great public unrest as a result of the spread of propaganda campaigns. So I think it's the erosion of democracy as well. So I think this has a great ability to really disrupt the flow of democracy as we understand it, but I think in terms of news journalism, we're going to need to design, like I said, better infrastructure for detecting deepfakes, and that's going to require practitioners and researchers working together, but it's also going to require better policies and management of that data flow as well.
Well, the fake news problem, of course, is something that we've talked a lot about in the last few years. Certainly since the US election in 2016, Brexit in the same year as well, and these sorts of cases, of course, have been well publicized. I think the problem is that fake news in itself is quite a complicated term because it's been used in so many different ways. It means genuinely fake news, made up stories that are being shared. But it also means whatever Donald Trump doesn't like today. So I think we need to find better terms for what we mean by this. I think for me, I distinguish a handful of things. There's one thing that you could call disinformation, which is deliberately made up news. And that certainly has been circulating a lot in recent years, particularly around these sorts of key events like the US election, like Brexit and so on. To some extent, it has been circulated by outside interests that wanted to influence elections, wanted to influence public opinion, certainly, on certain topics. And of course, the finger has been pointed there, particularly to Russia and its what's called the Internet Research Agency, which is a euphemism for a room full of hackers and trolls, essentially, that are creating this sort of content and sharing it quite widely. So that sort of content, of course, will influence journalism and will influence the news and public opinion about the news in very significant ways if it circulates widely, because it means that for every genuine story in a genuine news outlet, there might be an alternative fake news story that says the exact opposite. And if it's not really clear which of these is fake, if the fake news story is done so well that it sounds plausible and sounds like it could be genuine, then for an audience it will be very difficult to work out, well, what to believe anymore, basically.
Well, I think there are two kind of questions, and I'd probably like to deal with them separately. I think social media and journalism, I guess, the impact is that a lot of news media is made in shorter formats and it's made for the attention economy. So a lot of the things that we have already seen will continue gathering pace. There's going to be more audio visual content, less written articles, more things like your listicles and content that grabs attention and grabs eyeballs. Now, the impact of fake news on journalism I think is somewhat overstated at the moment. There's always been propaganda and misinformation in news, so I kind of reject the concept that fake news is something new. I think recent events have made it a very potent idea and something that has a lot of public attention, but it's not necessarily a new issue.
I think that misinformation will be a huge challenge, still be a really important challenge for social media and for journalism, especially in a moment where social media platforms are shifting from open networks to more private encrypted services like WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is the preferred app for more than 100 countries, and in countries like Brazil, Malaysia, and Mexico, they really use this app to consume news. And when we see this phenomenon, then it's really difficult to tackle misinformation, because this is based on personal networks, private groups, and the information is end-to-end encrypted. So this is a real challenge. Some media outlets, what they are doing is to calling for collaboration to users. This is what has been done in India. So the media outlets say, just send us the hoaxes or the information that you think that is misleading, and we will fact check this information. And most of this information is being circulated on WhatsApp. But the fact that it's not Twitter, that we can't really get this information and verify it, but we have to rely on what users are sending us, this is a real challenge for a healthy information or for journalism in general.
It's a problem, but also it seems as though it's a moral panic as well. I think certainly news, I think basically maybe the better question is that it demonstrates that social media platforms aren't good at moderating the kind of content that's on it. They aren't good at doing what basically traditional news outlets do, is that they're curating their content, making sure that what they present is factual and that is informative. They're not acting like a publisher, they're just acting like a platform for content. So I think that's probably a more interesting way of looking at the question, rather than maybe trying to get too bogged down in a panic about, say, fake news.